we changed the approach. Yeah, so I was just saying that we just want to start the meeting, but this evening we changed the approach a bit because we're talking about advanced kingdom conversation, and it's a conversation. Every conversation leads down a road, it leads down a path, it takes you down a journey. And it's very significant that I said somewhere, I said, many people do not know how many transactions and destinies that are sealed at conversations over the table. So this evening, we just took it a bit off the usual presentation of the profile of Northgate Global and my profile and a few other things. Nevertheless, we're going to have the profile of our speakers this evening. And so what I want to do is just to just briefly mention a couple of things and then turn it over to our speakers for tonight. Like I said, it promises to always be good. It promises to always be good in that God is in it. So once again, officially, let me just welcome you to the Advanced Kingdom Conversation 2020. I said last week that it has been very phenomenal, starting from the visit in 2018 by Anderson, followed in 2019 by Anderson and Wolf. And here we are, we have a whole family gathering. And this meeting usually is not the style. It would have been a 3-day in-person meeting straight away. But we consider that this would be a comfortable time for people to connect and we can have this conversation. So here we have folks from across the place. I don't see Henry's flag here, but Ireland is here, Henry is here. We have some folks from the US. We have Thomas joining us out of Oklahoma. Thomas is a new friend I met, and he mentioned Wolf, and I checked on him, and Wolf says Thomas is been in touch here and there with him, and Thomas really has a heart for stuff in Africa. And maybe much later we'll see how we connect Charles. Thomas is doing something down in Kenya. He has a school, and also I want to acknowledge everybody from Suriname, US, Philippines, Mozambique, Nigeria, everybody, Trini, Ethiopia, Kenya, Liberia, India. We acknowledge everybody here tonight, South Africa. So this is just brief about me. And this evening, we just want to go straight away and have the first presentation done. We have our dear friend, dear brother. This is a friend of mine. This is not just somebody who is just jumping in. He is a man planted with his wife as a seed with a message, and in the message within the bowls of Suriname. They are right in Suriname, and they are constructing the work. They are building a groundswell in Suriname for greater things that God wants to unleash through that region. Incubating a kingdom community that is to be referred to as Transformation Center, as terraforming entity bringing Christ-centered impact upon our environment at every level, at every level. Charbert, or Bet, as we shortly call him, Bet is married to Unica Alexander, and they are based in Suriname. So I just want to turn it over to Charbert, and Charbert, over to you. Tonight, just take us through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good evening to all. It's certainly a pleasure to connect. I was looking forward to the conversation with great anticipation and joy. It almost felt like, you know, when I was a little boy back in the islands, and I heard an uncle or an aunt is coming from England, there is this kind of excitement because you're expecting something, maybe some sweet or some chocolate or whatever. But it's always a real privilege and joy to connect with brothers and sisters of like mind. When that connection takes place, something definitely explodes and happens. So I'm looking forward to that. Just want to share a little bit. Yeah. Okay, just hope everyone can see my screen. Let's see this. All right. So I want to just share a few thoughts as it relates to consideration of the current season. Definitely, we are in a move of God. Something is happening in the earth, which we are a part of. I'll just open with a statement. Church, as we have known it, has definitely entered into a new and defining season. Things have changed. Things are definitely not the same. Something new has come upon us. And that season, I believe it's absolutely significant for us to be looking into, exploring, discovering, and investigating this season. Things have shifted and we have entered into a very sobering time. I think this is not a time to be drunk with our own ideas, drunk with our own ambition, drunk with our own self-interest and motivation, but a time to be absolutely sober with clear sight, clear understanding as to the demand of the kingdom, the demand of God for us in our locality at this time. And how do we posture ourselves in response to that demand? So that requires great soberness on my part, on your part, on our part collectively, in order to effectively execute and advance his purpose in the earth. I believe this cannot be done with any bit of trivial behavior, but absolute soberness, where we are really cautious and careful as to how we navigate. God is actually stripping away and unearthing accumulated inaccuracies. And there is a release of comprehensive and a complete sighting of a new reality. Now, things which we have laid hold for ages, ages and ages, and we thought would have been, or we thought as being real or the norm or the expected pattern, we are beginning to discover through sight that these are basically inaccurate postures and realities. And there is a demand to strip from that. There is a demand to break away. There is a demand to sever that connection. And I think that is absolutely interesting that we are at the crossroads where breaking away and emitting a new frequency is something that's upon us. The structures, the shapes, the forms, the models of what we would have called churches under the microscope. So things which we would have held dear to our heart, it's now being looked into, it's now being investigated, it's now being assessed. And that assessment is bringing us to a place of greater alignment, greater accuracy, because we are seeing the standard of God clearly established, and we are seeing the inaccuracies of the things which we have built. Now, because God is showing us his standard, and we can compare that standard with what we have built, it brings us to a place of, whether we call it an ashamed posture. I am ashamed of what I have built, because what I have built is not necessarily accurately aligned according to his desire, his dictates, and his demand. So all the effort and energy which I have exerted in building and building something for my own self, I now have to abandon that, because there is a light that is now shining, examining the structure of the things which I've built. Now, critically, how relevant are we to the purpose of God in the nation? How relevant are you to the purpose of God wherever you are at? How relevant am I to the purpose of God in this nation? I think that is absolutely critical for us to consider, because we are not just occupying space and time. There is a demand and expectation of God upon us to execute in the nation. So the question of relevance come into play. The things that I'm engaged in Is it relevant to the forward mobility, the forward thrust, the forward advancement of the purpose of God? Or is it just advancing my own self-interest or an organizational self-interest? But how is it contributing to the advance of the purpose of God? Now, how am I posturing myself in the day of the Lord's demand? This is a day that God is demanding and is making a demand of us. A critical component is, how am I posturing myself in that demand? That, I believe, is absolutely significant to us together, advancing and bringing forward the purposes of God in the earth. And so that new demand is placed upon the body of Christ. And you are equally responsible. I am equally responsible to seeing that thing find expression. New architectures are descending upon the church, and it is demanding that builders latch onto this new architecture. So what new architecture is coming upon you? What is this thing that is descending, which require you and I to latch onto and to cause that thing to find expression? It's almost like this guy who did a Passover, and the scripture says there has been no Passover like that of Josiah from the days of whenever. The question is, he saw something, he latched onto it and allowed that thing to find expression in the earth. So it's the same for me, the same for you. Something is descending from above, and it is our responsibility, my responsibility, your responsibility, to latch onto that and allow that to find expression wherever you are at, wherever I'm at. That new design, that new architecture definitely needs to find expression in our day-to-day operation in our locality. And how it expresses itself, of course, there may be a diversity of operation, but the significant thing is allowing that thing to find expression. This current shift comes with a demand for relevance, competence, and sustained accuracy. Like we said earlier on, it's not a time to be drunk, but time to be very sober. And out of this soberness, we can execute, display, and dispense the question of relevance, competence, and sustained accuracy in the purposes of God. This is not a time for us to be arbitrary or superficial or duplistic in our behavior or void of transforming energy. But this is a time where we are actually able to be conduits and facilitators of the purposes of God in the earth. And that purpose is bringing a sense of relevance, competence, and accuracy to the lives of those who are submitting to it. It is absolutely clear that the landscape has changed. And the landscape has changed. Things have definitely changed. Things cannot and will not be the same again. And the critical component, I think, is we can either accelerate or we can retard the change process. I am committed to accelerating, adding momentum, adding weight, adding velocity to the change process, as opposed to retarding that process. So changing the landscape is, I think, a very significant issue for our consideration. The question of relevance, how appropriate am I to the desire and the demand of God and his kingdom? That is the basic thing. Being appropriate to God's demand, to his desire, to that expectation of the kingdom. The Ark of the Covenant, that scenario gives us a clear picture of the question of relevance. The idea of putting the Ark on a new cart was a very good idea. It was absolutely lovely. It was absolutely nice to think of this precious thing. Let me do something new, all right, and put it on a cart for newly built specifically for that purpose. But that was not God's design. That was not the appropriate posture that he wanted. And the question is, what are we really using to carry the purpose of God in this era? What is this ark being carried upon? What cart have we built upon which the ark is being carried? And I think that is absolutely significant for us to look into. How appropriate is that mechanism of transportation? So what does the new cart represent to you? Maybe something for you to think about, for me to think about and to examine. What are the things we are pushing in front or pushing that finds its origin, strength, and definition in the might of men? So there are things that maybe we are pushing, but it is finding its strength, its origin, its definition in the might of men. Building a cart is definitely finding its origin, its strength, and then its definition in the ability and competence of men, and not necessarily in the design and the architecture of what God had in his mind. So that's absolutely critical. The question of competence, resources, abilities are now becoming platforms of kingdom expression. Things which we would have frowned upon in the past, or persons whom we would not have even given a second thought. God is now laying hold of them, and they are now responding and being platforms of expression of kingdom demand. And I think that is a very, very beautiful thing, because if we are seeing this power gap is collapsing, it's not the elite, as it were, it's not only the Pharisee, but even the insignificant man, or the man who considers himself insignificant, has value to add to the purpose of God in the earth. So that is absolutely beautiful, where the power gaps are collapsing right before our eyes. And we are coming into a place of greater proximity to the purposes of God, greater proximity to the mandate of God, greater proximity to the kingdom. This just reminds me of Jesus and the interaction with these fishermen, these guys. And you can imagine fishermen. Well, I'm not sure what a fisherman is like in your area, but from the islands, it's an environment you have the most, let's say, rowdy guys, and the guys who would use the most indecent language, the rough guys, as it were. That was the environment where they were at. But out of that environment, Jesus went and called them guys and used them, and they were able to actually bring transformation to an entire nation. So the totality of creation comes to a place of kingdom expression. Nobody's been left out. Nothing has been left out. Everything has mass in it to express kingdom values. Therefore, every part is significant. No part is being discounted. Every part is significant. And we can't continue to treat members of the body of Christ like prosthetics in a warehouse, only waiting to exercise usefulness as replacement. So when this part has suffered some sort of injury or disease or defect, and it is being amputated, you then have a replacement that then comes into place of functionality. But that part which is looked down upon, it has significant value, and its significance must be explored. Its significance must definitely be taken into consideration, and that part must be brought into a place of functional maturity, right? The way in which we look at how the saints are treated in the nation in which I reside, it's absolutely pathetic, and we need a situation where these saints are empowered and bring to a place of absolute functional maturity. They are equal to the stake. They have an equal stake at the table. They're equal to the purposes of God. So they should not be discounted, but their potential should be allowed to find expression. The deposit of Jesus in them should be allowed to find expression. And I think that is absolutely critical as we move forward. One of the things that is absolutely amazing, and for the past weeks have really been rolling over in my mind, is this issue in Exodus 30, spices for the anointing oil. Here it is, we had cinnamon, we had other herbs that would be used for cooking. God was using those very simple spices or herbs to make a wonderful perfume. And what's really striking about that is the fact that these herbs had hidden potential that they themselves maybe did not even realize. It is the same way that the saints, within them reside hidden potential, capacity that they don't even realize. But through collaboration and collaborative activity, something is activated. And one of the things I'm very happy about that God is doing, there is a significant level of collaboration taking place. And that is bringing absolute sight, clearer sight to the purposes of God. So we are not there sitting and seeing men as trees, but we have absolute pristine sight of what's happening. So your spice is important to the fragrance of God in the earth. Whatever that is deposited in you is of absolute importance to the fragrance of God in the earth. So we should not deprive the fragrance of God, find an expression by withholding your spice or withholding my spice. Let's bring that spice into the equation, into the mixture, and cause the fragrance of God to see importance, to be magnified, to be amplified in the earth. You give volume, weight, velocity to the purpose of God in the earth. And I think that is absolutely beautiful, that even me, even you, we give volume, we bring weight, velocity to the purpose of God in the earth. That's beautiful. So the necessity for correct placement. I like these two passages because they really talked about how God positioned me, position you as he pleased. All right. 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 18. But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. So it's not about my preference or your preference. It's about his pleasure, the thing that pleases him. So he has positioned us according to what pleases him. So the necessity for correct placement is going to be absolutely critical in this moment, in this time, in what we are seeing. In the Ephesians, he talks about the whole body is joined together and every joint is supplying. So if I'm correctly positioned in the whole dynamics of things, I'm able to channel the purposes of God in the right direction without contamination. And that I think is absolutely beautiful again, that we can channel the purposes of God without any contamination. We can advance the things of the kingdom without any defilement. Sustained accuracy. We want to see a posture, a situation where there is a continuous accurate position before God, consistent to all of his demand. So not something that is going to be consistent or hot today, as we say in the islands, and then tomorrow it's just drop dead. But something that has life that can go on through endless ages and does not lose its momentum. It does not lose its momentum. The end product must be of equal strength as the beginning. The end product must be of equal strength as the beginning. And that is beautiful. We see this through the guys back in the book of Joshua. Just want to look at Joshua 14. I'll just jump right into verse 11. So here an interaction is taking place, a conversation is taking place about the promised land, the land which they went to spy out and to see the land with milk and honey and the condition of the land. Some persons brought back a very negative report. Yes, the land is beautiful, but there are giants there. We cannot go in, we cannot possess. But some persons or some guys actually brought a report saying, yes, that might be true. That is true, but we can go in. And what I like about Joshua and Caleb's posture is really what I saw in verse 11. He made a statement, as yet I am as strong this day as on that day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength. And that's what I really want to just emphasize and focus on, that just as posture. One, age and time does not dilute the potency of the download from above. So no matter he was 40 years now and he's maybe 80 plus years, that same strength and capacity which he had then in the beginning Now, at the twilight of his years, he still had that same momentum, that same capacity, that same strength. Age and time did not dilute that momentum or that capacity. The just as capacity, you know, there were no cracks, no leakage. There was a consistent and amplified frequency through endless ages. And that I think is absolutely critical. There is a consistent and amplified frequency through endless ages. We look at the various moves of God which have happened in the past. Somewhere down the line, it loses its momentum. Somewhere down the line, it becomes institutionalized. Somewhere down the line, it loses its focus. But what we are seeing and what our heart is and our desire and posture is that this thing will be as potent, as strong, as relevant as it was in the beginning. So likewise, the end shall be an amplified frequency without any sorts of crack or leakage, but something that is consistent to the eternal values that has been deposited. So this is the day of sustained momentum. Our momentum is fueled by sight birth out of fresh eye. We trust that God in this season brings upon us sight that is birth out of fresh eye, that we can see absolutely clearly, see his preferred position. Our sight is not limited to what makes me feel comfortable, but that preferred location, that sight from him, it allows me to break the entrapment of my flesh, my preference, our preference. And we are actually now gaining a sense of fresh eyes, new perspective, new areas. It's like what Isaiah saw in the wilderness. You know, there were rivers being made to flow, roadways were being constructed. So areas that seem desolate, areas that seem unproductive, areas that seem uninhabitable, because of a posture of sight, because of sight, those areas now started to take on new form and new shape. So I trust that these words would have really sparked something and helped to stir some of us and what is being released in this time. May we catch onto it, latch onto it with fresh eyes. So, Mark, I think I will wrap it up at that and hand it back over to you.
Yay, wonderful, wonderful. Like I said earlier, today's meeting is tilted a bit, and it's shifted more to not just like what we did last week, even though we have the quotes in the background, and it would have been beautiful to bring these quotes out and all. But I think it's still okay to have just a few thoughts, maybe two, three comments. It's fine. 2, 3 comments will be fine. So who wants to say something? Who wants to give some feedback, share some thoughts? And so the floor is open. Just 2 or 3 comments is fine. Two or three comments. Whoa.
Well, I like I really resonate with the idea of fresh eyes and a fresh approach and a fresh heart. There's a lot to consider here. What was said by Charbert, and the thing about the shame in what was formerly built was really striking, and so for me, there's always an introspection to look at and to see, God, what can I give you more? What can I give you authentically? What can I give you truthfully? But I like the idea you close with, was looking at this with fresh eyes, which requires a heart that is true and unfeigned. So I appreciate that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Looking at it with fresh eyes. Maybe it's just a second comment and then we can switch to somebody is unmuted. Who is there? Okay, Lucy.
Yeah, it's me. Yes, it's me, Mark.
Good.
Yeah, so I think what has come out so clearly to me today also is the bit of how you see people, how you handle people, and there's this aspect that is talked about on collaboration. And I remember, I think it's another conversation. I think it's leadership that you are talking about collaboration, and even how you see others. It's more about, and something has been mentioned that has just got me, that has just tagged to me on seeing others as prosthetics, like only needing them when there's something that needs to be taken care of. So, but I'm just trying to remember. I'm like, it's just coming out clearly that it's collaboration is more about the power that comes out of us coming together, and it, for that power to come out, or for that greatness to come out, you have to see the other person as having something that is worth having, or as having something that needs to be put or merged into whatever you are doing. So it's just coming out that the importance of how we see people, how we see, even in how we engage with people, how do I imagine the other person to be, and that really translates to how do you, like I'm just talking about how you handle people, how do you see people, and unless we see people as God sees them, it will be hard for us to pretend that we are doing things that are supposed to bring change, or something that are better or higher for the world of Babylon to take after. So this is really important. It has just struck me that it is being repeated constantly, and I'm also looking at why and how do I engage people? What's the motive? Is it to look better, or is it only for me to gain, or is it for a common good? All these questions are coming to me right now. And finally, when Charbert was talking about the structure and God's design, now I was asking myself how I just noted something. Let me just read it as I speak. Yes, talking about structure, shape, and form of things. Do they really take God's design? Do I even know this design to build on? Do I even know the design that I'm supposed to look into first before I start building? So that came out on assessing relevance. So coming from a place that we are used to doing things because they look good or they look better without knowing where the design is coming from. These are some of the questions that are really coming into my mind. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Lucy. Wonderful. Kelvin. One and only
yes,
dear Kelvin Muhammad.
Well, it's good to be here, and greetings to all. I'm afraid to say good evening or good morning or good afternoon. The time zones are very different. But I one of the things I noted is that when Caleb says, "My strength is the same as the day when God spoke to me," and there's a definite connection between clarity of vision and sustainability of strength and energy. There's a clear connection there. One of the reasons that Caleb was able to do that is because his sight was clear. He had clear sight, and remembering, Mark, what you told me that your theme is blueprint. We got to remember the blueprint, the understanding of the blueprint that God's plan for Israel was to come into the promised land. That was his word, that they were to exodus Egypt, they were to traverse through the wilderness, but the intention of God was to possess that clarity of vision, uh, sustained his strength. And I found, that when people lose sight of the original intent of God, it is then that strength begins to wane. Strength begins to, we begin to lose strength so that, sight is might. Sight is might. That you can only go as far as you see, but then you can only do as far as you see. So there's a definite connection between sight and sustainability of strength, and of course, the power to execute. So I'll hold it there. Thank you.
Wonderful. This is good. Really, really good. Charbert, thank you. It's wonderful.